Welcome to another episode of the Chill by Nette podcast. This podcast is created for those who are passionate about their personal development, health, and well-being. This is a platform for you to come chill by my personal stories and weekly tips in becoming a better version of ourselves and to live a better present. But first, let's chill. My name is Jeannette. Welcome back. So we have come to the end of series 1, and I just thought that it's about time that I dedicate a short episode to introduce myself and just, to share a little bit more about myself and what I have discovered about myself in this journey so far. Since, this whole series was, centered around finding the self, so I just thought that, it will be appropriate to, introduce myself proper in this episode. Yeah, so I often find myself asking myself, what's the purpose of my life? What do I live for? And it's not until this year that I think I can finally say that I've, found an convincing answer, at least one that my heart agrees with. So I think, nothing makes me more happy and nothing feels more liberating when I say that I live for authenticity and self-expression through self-understanding. And I'm also not afraid to, express that I do have a very high innate desire for the world to recognize and appreciate the uniqueness that I have to offer to the world. So I guess, everybody is different, right, in our own ways. But for me, I guess I just find a higher need to really embrace and highlight the difference in me. I mean, that's kind of me at this point of my life. I do have a very strong desire for personal autonomy and self-expression. I think I really thrive in an environment that gives me the space to think and share my thoughts in a free-spirited way, that is according to my values. I think this is one of my revelations before I decided that I couldn't work in places with little room for self-expression, regardless how good other factors may seem. I think the main thing is I need that space, I need that freedom to be able to express. I just don't deal very well with rigid structures and, a fixed way of doing things. So I think the biggest question here is, have I found the self, right? So I think the journey to finding the self is going to be a never-ending journey. And I just see it as like a constant process where we will keep losing ourselves and probably, keep finding ourselves again, Because to me, simply put, I just don't think that there is a real destination to self-discovery, right? I think it's just a constant journey where we just keep losing a bit of ourselves and then probably we just keep finding ourselves again. So rather than asking, have I found the self? I think the question to be asking is, along this 27 years of my life, how many times have I lose myself and find myself for the past 27 years of my living? I think countless of times, but there is purpose and growth in all of those times which I've lost myself, which had led me to the person I am today, including, what had happened in the past year. I think was also one of the major times that I, come to lose myself and find myself again. So on this note, I just also wanted to share a little story because this is not the first time that I've actually felt this way about losing the self. There are many instances in between my life, during my life that I felt that I wasn't sure who I am. And as far as I can recall, I think the very first time that I felt that I lost myself was actually at a very young age. I think it was when I was 14. I think that really forms a very big part of my identity and who I am today, right? So yeah, I clearly remember, the very first time I lost myself was, I think, at the age of 14. But to really speak about this experience, I think I really need to go back to the time where I was 10 years old, right? I think so when I was 10 years old, my entire family actually moved to China. So when I was younger, I actually spent 4 years of my childhood in China. I left Singapore at the age of 10, and I went to China with my family due to my dad's work. So to be more specific, it's actually the Tianjin province of China where I studied in an international school, which to some extent I think it had kind of like opened up my world at a very young age. You know, I got to meet people from different cultures and, you know, different countries, which taught me the importance of being open-minded and kind of, you know, everyone is their own context with their own set of experience. And basically, you know, the entire school was just made up of international kids. There were no locals in that school, so that's why it's called international school, right? They also have an entirely like different education system because it was an American international school where they really place a huge emphasis on, you know, character building. It places a lot of emphasis on, you know, embracing differences. I think partly because the school was made up of people with so many different cultures, they just really have to be inclusive. And, you know, English was the only language that we could speak, because if we speak any other language other than English, we would be sent to the principal office. Like, it was a serious offense in my school, because I think that was how it was part of, you know, the school efforts to make everyone feel included. You know, it was a way to include everyone. If not, everybody would just be, you know, speaking their own language, and it's not very nice if, you know, people are not able to understand what you're saying. Yeah, so I think on a side note, that was also where I developed my love for the Chinese culture. I think living in China allowed me to visit many different places. You know, during our school breaks or even weekends, I think my dad would just drive us around to visit different historical sites, you know. Yeah, and basically just the opportunity to interact with the locals there as well. I've come to see that and learn that, you know, it's a beautiful country. So those 4 years of memories really do have a big place in my heart, and I think it kind of influenced my growing up process as well, because I think it played a really, really big part because of how it had broadened my world at a really young age, right? So the point of saying this is not only that, you know, I just also wanted to share this story because I wanted to share that, you know, the first time that I ever felt that I lost myself and somewhat faced an identity crisis was at the age of 14, when my dad decided to move back to Singapore due to my grandmother's health condition. You know, back then, if not, we probably would still be there, right? So to be honest, it was one of like the most difficult periods of my life. You know, I think even my parents didn't know about this, you know, but even sharing this now is a bit scary for me, you know, even though it's been 12 years, but I still remember every single bit of it, you know, very clearly, even till today. Like, all that I was feeling within me was something that I didn't have the courage to see and face only until I became an adult. And I only wanted to share this because it forms such a big part of my identity that I felt the discussion around the self wouldn't really be complete if I didn't expose this side of me and what I have been through as a kid. So whatever I'm going to be sharing, you know, really did form a big part of my identity, you know, and it was also part of the reason why I came to place such an important emphasis on self-identity and also emotional well-being today. So as far as I could recall, you know, when I came back to Singapore, I was just basically slot into a secondary school near my house because I was just 14 back then. And when I got placed into a secondary school, it was the middle of a school term, right? So I did face a bit of difficulties assimilating back to Singapore's education system. But that wasn't the main point, right? I think it's normal that with any kind of move, from schools to schools, country to country, you will face a bit of uncomfortableness and discomfort, because ultimately it's a new place. You have to meet new people, new students, new teachers, right? So I think to some extent it was normal for me to have that kind of uncomfortableness when I had to kind of restart my life. I have to kind of form new friends, get used to a new system altogether. But it was not just that, okay? There was something more specific than that. So as far as I could recall, when I came back to Singapore, I did face quite a bit of, difficulties. I did face quite a bit of, I don't know what to call it, discrimination or what, but what I knew for sure was I was going through an identity crisis, okay? Because everybody thought that I was a Chinese nationality. Like, no matter how I explained that I'm a Singaporean who left Singapore at the age of 10. I lived abroad for 4 years and, come back to Singapore. Nobody can really grasp that concept that I am a Singaporean. But instead, everybody thought that, I was a Chinese nationality, because I think for some reason at that young age, I think probably because it was also 12 years ago, expat moves and, moving overseas wasn't really a common thing. I think nobody could really comprehend my situation. And I knew this from the way, people responded to me. So nobody seemed to understand, what does the term international school means. Everybody just thought that, I'm a Chinese national. And not that I have anything against Chinese nationals, like that's the last thing that's on my mind, but it's more of like I felt so misunderstood, right? That nobody could see things the way I do, and at the same time, I just felt that my identity was kind of like stolen away from me, right? Because yeah, I was just being perceived like really differently by others. And I think to some extent it was also because I looked different. I had really fair skin because of the weather conditions in China, and I kind of spoke English differently as well, with an accent, because I studied in an American international school where students are mostly international. So I guess like I was just, the way I behaved was really different as well. Perhaps I acted more openly and I was just more daring to express, because ultimately I studied in an international school where everybody was just really more open and friendly, right? So anyway, I was just really not well received by people when I came back, because everybody just saw that I was really different, and because of how I was perceived as really different. And you might be wondering, of course, what's so bad about being different, right? I mean, I had came a long way before I saw being different as something that is unique, right? But when I was younger, I hated being different, especially at the age of 14, because being different means that I'll get called names, I'll get mocked at, right? So, people started calling me names and telling me to go back to my country and I don't belong here, They even mock at me with a Chinese accent, And I still clearly remember that my literature teacher, he questioned me in front of the entire class, asking if I could understand English. How humiliating that felt. So it was really like one of like my most difficult periods. Like back then I was 14, I would cry a lot by myself as a kid in secondary school. And I think to some extent that really affected me a lot. I used to be someone who is so confident, right? But ever since I came back to Singapore at the age of 14, I just felt that, my self-identity was denied, and basically I just didn't know who I was anymore to some extent. So, like if people did not believe that I was a Singaporean, I also start to come to believe that, I'm not a Singaporean. The idea of self-fulfilling prophecy was really evident here. Like whatever people perceive me as and what people think I am, I kind of like project those perceptions onto myself as well. So I also came to believe, I'm not a Singaporean at a very young age. So I really identify with the fact that I'm a Singaporean a lot lesser because of how powerful these perceptions can sometimes be, right? You know, how much power they have over you, especially at such a young age, right? And it's so weird because when I'm abroad, I felt that I was so proud of this identity of mine. You know, when I'm in China, I just felt really proud to be a Singaporean. I really identify with, you know, my nationality. But when I'm in my own country and when people of my own nationality treated me like that, you know, to some extent, I just didn't feel like I could ever associate with this identity anymore, even though I want to. Like, I was just kind of not allowed to, right? And even teachers, you know, adults, right, you know, label me as the one from China. Like, I don't think they do it purposely, but it's just for ease of identification. But they do not have any idea how much these, you know, way of identifying me out of convenience, right, how much impact that has actually brought to me, you know, how much that had affected the way I look at myself. They did not realize how much that insensitive words had shaped my development as a kid, right? It really affected my self-image, my self-perception, and I guess I was just really young back then, you know. I didn't have the power nor the maturity or any strong sense of self like how I do right now to kind of, you know, really separate people's perception of who I am and what I really am, right? So I guess when I was that age, all I cared about was being accepted. You know, all I wanted to be was to be accepted by my peers, by my classmates, right? And to be honest, I just really hated myself. And I know at that point of time, all I wanted to do is to hide this part of my identity so bad that people would just stop seeing me as different. And people would just stop discriminating me and stop calling me names. Yeah, and to some extent, I was really bullied in class. The worst thing was my hair was being cut as well during one of the Chinese lessons, right? And yeah, I think this is something that even my parents are not aware of that has happened to me. Like, I faced, I think, 1 whole year of like bullying until, you know, when I was 15, I finally had the chance to really change my class. I managed to change my class and, you know, escape from those bullies. But, you know, even since then, it really had impacted me. I felt that, you know, I just kind of seldom ever mentioned this part of my identity to anyone that I met after that because of how I've associated this identity, this part of me, as being different, this overseas experience as something that would get me to be outcasted and, you know, to get me to be disliked. So I always hide this part of me. It has always been hidden within me, even throughout junior college, right? Yeah, it was something that I feel so ashamed of. Or rather ashamed of, it was just something that I was really fearful to share with other people because this is exactly the thing that got me bullied in secondary school. And yeah, at a point in time, I really didn't have the power to stand up for myself back then, right? I really didn't. I just kind of saw this entire, you know, 4 years of experience overseas as a flaw in me. And I just kind of also resented my parents. I didn't understand why they have to send me to China and then send me back to face all this shit, right? I mean, I love my experience in China, you know, but I kind of grew to hate it as well when I came back to Singapore because of what I've been through. So it was not until my university days where I took psychology. You know, it was one of the best decisions I've made of my life, right? To take up psychology as one of my majors because it had really changed my perspective about life. It made me understand so much more about human behavior and what I had been through as a little girl back then. So I've come to learn that I was in fact going through an identity crisis, right? A rather bad one. And it was extremely, you know, impactful for my personal development because it had happened at a stage where my identity and all was still forming, right? I mean, if it happened maybe when I was 20 years old, you know, it might not be that detrimental, but because it had happened at the age of 14 during one of my early teenage years. I think it really affected my developmental process, right? So I guess it was kind of like a trauma for me back then. So thinking back, right, I really hope that I could stand up more for myself and saw that what I had been through was a unique part of me, right? It was what made me who I am today. It's because of that experience that I am someone who can be so open-minded, I am someone who is tolerant of differences and various cultures, but as much as I kind of feel this way now, I think back then when I was just a 14-year-old kid, I have to say that it's definitely almost near impossible for me to even, have the slightest thought about that, because I was just a kid, right? I mean, just because at an age all I wanted to do was to fit in and to be liked by everyone else, and most importantly to be accepted. I guess I just didn't have that maturity and that capability to actually have all these thought process. But of course, as I get older with more maturity, I was able to see things from a different perspective. So now I really value that part of my experience, and I can kind of see how that kind of made me into the person I am today with all that positive traits and all that. But back then I really was really affected by it. And yeah, I think a lot of my energy in the past was actually spent, hiding this part of myself that I really also didn't have that much energy to really focus on my studies. And yeah, it was really exhausting. Yeah, it was really exhausting for me. Yeah, so it was really one of, a major moment of my life where I felt like I've lost my sense of self and, self-worth. Not to mention there are so many other smaller and not so major times in between as well that I felt that I constantly lose myself. Based on, painful experiences, based on how people treat us, but that's how we actually find ourselves as well, right? Because we emerge as stronger individuals as compared to before. And each of these experiences, for me right now, are just nothing more than, great stories to tell other people, as a way of introducing myself to others. I think this is something that I might, bring up during one of my conversations. So I mean, not very long ago, these memories are still filled with a lot of resentment, and they do affect me. But I realize that as I get older, I think they really do fade away with time and, eventually just become part of my stories to tell as part of, introducing the self. And I believe that the self is constantly changing and being shaped by new experiences, be it happy ones or painful ones. I think it just makes our life more unique in our own way. But of course, I think it's not easy to see this until, sometime later. But I have been learning to, embrace all that, I've been exposed to along the way as part of shaping me into who I am. And I am really excited to see where this path will continue to lead me to. So with this, I genuinely hope that you had enjoyed this first series of Chill by Nette, and it had helped you to be more confident in finding your own path and gave you the courage to move towards the direction of greater fulfillment. Thanks for chilling in. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. You can also connect with me on Instagram at chillbynette, on my website chillbynette.com to join the conversation and access our show notes. Have a great day, and we'll chill again very soon.